All right. Welcome, everyone, to this edition of the SBYA Lit Project, Sexual Violence and Young Adult Literature Project Google Hangout. Today, we are going to be joined by author A.S. King, who wrote, can you see this? There you go, Gloria O'Brien's History of the Future, which we're going to be talking about. Krista Desir, who is the author of Faultline and the recently released Bleed Like Me. She's going to be our moderator tonight, this afternoon. I'll hand it over to her in a minute. I'm already ready for bed. And Chri Misrobian, whose book Perfectly Good White Boy just came out, is going to be talking with us too. And we're going to be talking about a wide variety of things, sparked in part by the awesomeness that is Gloria O'Brien, which in all three of these books just came out in October, I believe. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Krista.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I never know if it's like 4 people or 400 people. That's kind of the fun of Google Hangouts. But right now it's just the 4 of us. So I love that we're getting like shots of Chri drinking her coffee. So anyway, today we're talking with Amy, and we are talking a little about Glory, and we're also talking about, I think, I don't know, I guess I want to sort of talk about feminism in general, especially in light of our, Glory is kind of considered a feminist book. I for sure thought of it that way. I'm sure Chri did too, and Karen. But definitely in light of, Time Magazine's decision to put feminists as like a problem word out into the world, and then the 4chan guys like decided to like really make it a problem word. I am very interested in, I guess, everyone's kind of take on what they consider feminist, how you define it, like where you sort of land on that, and then from there, I guess we can talk a little bit more about Glory, but like maybe that's kind of our opener, and then we can even talk a little bit about how it pertains to sexual violence. So, Amy, you want to go first?
Yeah, I pulled out my high school dictionary, the American Heritage Dictionary, which is what I pull out every time someone talks to me about feminism, and this is what I think feminism is. It's a noun. And it is the advocacy of the political, social, and economic equality of men and women. And that's what I think feminism is. I think that all it is I think it's huge. It's because of our culture. It's so necessary in our culture because we are still so white male dominated. I think it's become a different word. I don't watch television. I don't listen to the radio. I haven't done so in 17 years. I don't judge anybody who does. It's just not for me. It gives me I don't know, thoughts. It gives me thoughts. So for me, feminism just means that I have daughters, man, and I'd like them to have a better shot at fair pay than my mother and I had. When they go to work. I can tell you a story about that later, about what my boss said to me when I asked him for a raise once. That was great. But for me, I just think that it really does just mean the advocacy for equality. It's civil rights. If you go into the same dictionary and look up civil rights, actually gender is part of it's race, gender, etc. So it's just civil rights for human beings. That's what I really think it boils down to.
Mm-hmm. Chri?
Okay, so I would say all of that is true, and that's all. I totally agree with that. I think why people get all tied up in a knot about the word is I think they're crabby that the word female is embedded in this effort that really wants to advocate for everybody. And they don't like the idea that they think that it's just women wanting to advocate for themselves, as if that's a terrible thing, which it obviously is not. But the idea that is on the marquee, and we're advocating for people that don't have certain privileges or voices. I think of feminism as advocating a lot for children, because children don't start political movements, right? And so, but again, people just look at the term and they look at female as embedded in it, and they think it's some, big bitchy, snotty club or something, when really what Amy said about it being about civil rights for everyone. Feminism is for men too. I don't think a lot of men appreciate being stuck in the roles that patriarchy lays out for them. It hurts men just as much as it hurts women, even though I'm always joking and saying to my husband, well, you know, I'll say, yes, well, women get multiple orgasms, you get patriarchy, dirty shirt, oh well, you know, but I really don't think patriarchy is that fair to him either, that he has to play that icky role where he doesn't get to cry and he has to do certain jobs and he has to always be strong. Like, it has consequences for everybody. But I think people in like the 4chan folks get all bent out of shape about the fact that women are on the marquee advocating for all of humanity, and they don't look past that.
Yeah, I think, you know, and I also think that the idea that, and I feel like I've been bumping into this a lot, is the idea that we are not capable of wanting more than one thing at a time. Like that in this particular case, like if you want women to be, you know, in Amy's case, if you want women to be paid the same amount men, it's like somehow at the expense of men, and it's really not at the expense of men. And I feel like, you know, if you want to empower women or, you know, do something and so that there's equal footing, it's not at someone else's expense. There's not a buy-in of, well, if I want this, therefore I have to hate men, you know, and I think that's always a problem. Or, you know, or I have to, and I think in some ways, like these, I think terms get sort of reappropriated into a way that so people think, well, this is what this means. This is, you know, it means I can't like people, you know, I can't like dudes, or that I always have to be fighting for something. And, you know, that's exhausting. I think that's so exhausting. It's not this constant fight. It's just being able to be like, hey, you know, when we both, like me and Julio both get hired for the same job, I'd like the same paycheck. I mean, it's not that complicated, you know, and I think like when you turn it into like all these different other things, like then it gets a lot more complicated. And I think like there's not an either or. If I'm advocating, so in the world of sexual violence, right? If I'm advocating for survivors who are women and girls, this is not me saying, oh, and by the way, men suck. Like that's not, you know, these two things are not exclusive. And I think I have really been sort of really into the idea of men being involved in this movement, in the sexual violence movement in general, because I think like that's how you actually get people to, I don't know, I mean, get involved when you have everyone in the dialogue, everyone in the discourse. So yeah, Chri, you want to say something? I know you do.
Yeah, I think that like this is what I was thinking about with Glory in the book. Is how what she does, like she kind of has this view of herself as being somewhat antisocial, but what she's doing is so powerful that she is going around documenting everybody and then labeling what she sees and going around, and people are dependent on her to take their picture for the yearbook, and there's that surface thing, but the idea of her creating the content and being a voice, I feel like that's a pretty new thing for women, and it's so powerful that she is going to decide what these images are, what she's going to keep and write into her future. And I think, you know, we could get all like graduate school and talk about the male gaze and John Berger and all of that, but I just think like her moving through the world in and having that ability to photograph and record and document, the fact that we live in this really over-documented society where everything can be documented, and it sometimes causes me anxiety, but more often than not, I feel reassured by it, because I feel like women are watching and they're noticing and they're calling you out on things that are offensive and wrong and cruel, and there is documentation, there is YouTube footage, there are the pictures on Instagram. You cannot be private. You do not get to have your bad behavior be private anymore, and I find that with you know, a whole nation of Glory O'Briens with their cameras, I find that so exciting and hopeful, and I don't think that women have had the reins, you know, if you think about all of accumulated human history, they haven't been the content creators or documenters, that they've always been pushed to the side. That's so important because that changes what we talk about. And it, again, does not allow people in power to say, well, this is how it went, or this is how history went down, because there's evidence now that it didn't. And I love about it, like, it was this solitary thing she's doing, and she's doing it for her own reasons about discovering what was going on in her mother's mind and why her mother's dead. And but really, this larger way of walking through the world it was sort of, I don't know if you'd call that an irony, but how she was connecting to the whole world was through that camera, and being the seeing eye is so powerful. So
awesome. That's
I just derailed us.
Which blows me away, as always. I never even thought about that part of it, so thanks for making me think of it that way. But yeah, I was a photographer, so it just sort of was normal, but at the same time, I wasn't a photographer the way she is. I am now, because camera phones. But I think it's interesting, actually. I'm going to go back because you guys have all said really smart things about feminism, and the idea that we're advocating for everyone is really important. And Chri, what you said about men being stuck in certain roles, this is sort of this idea. For me, the idea is that, okay, so, all right, so I lived in Ireland for a long time. My husband's Irish, right? And so he has his Irish history book from, whatever, early 70s, mid-70s. Mm-hmm. And it still basically says that during the famine, the Irish were too stupid to figure out how to eat. Now, this is the history book that someone else wrote, want to guess who, about, for Irish students as late as this. So, for me, like, even learning about Cromwell over there was mind-blowing to me, because so many people in Ireland didn't know that Cromwell had committed total genocide. Like, kill them, they're Catholic, kill them. I don't care, nits breed lice, kill the babies, killed everybody, right? So Cromwell comes through, and then in the history books, they're like, oh, Cromwell, we don't look at him like we look at Adolf Hitler. We don't look at him like we look at so many other people who do this, but it's in the history book this way, and therefore it must be. And women are totally left out of history books. Have you guys ever read the picture book Independent Dames by Laurie Halsey Anderson? It was so great, and it was one of those books I got for my kids because I didn't know that during, the War of Independence, so many women, I live near Philly, and I grew up around this area, so I knew Betsy Ross. She made a flag. But outside of that, I didn't know, so many other great, historical women. And in fact, our history in elementary school, public school, is usually dominated by what's still dominating, which is fine, except it's actually not fine. It's one of those things that that makes us, I saw Sarah Silverman said something the other day, not the other day, I saw her say it the other day, I'm sure she said it ages ago, but she said something like, you know what I'm sick of? I'm sick of people telling girls, you can do anything, because before that moment, they actually already did think they could do anything. And it's interesting, right? And I'm just going to seg. Do you mind if I seg? I'm segging, all right? Stop me if you don't want me to seg. Just click off. But, okay. So I was there this morning, and I was thinking about this chat, and I was thinking about the different letters I've received over the years from all my books. Because, as a teacher once accused me of, during a book club visit, I have feminist undertones in my books. And they're not really undertones, they're overtones. Like, I'm me, like I write the books, so there you go, right? So the first letter I got regarding sexual violence in one of my books was on the Dust of 100 Dogs. And this woman wrote, and she said, basically, how dare you include a scene with sexual violence in a book for teenagers. This is inappropriate material for them. Now, that was the first and only bit of, I'm not going to call it hate mail because she was kind of respectful, but, challenging mail that I ever got. And since then, I don't really answer those questions because, well, that's why I write books. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
well, for them to also, it's starting the dialogue. It's not for you to be, like, bandering back,
Exactly. So So anyways, then I'm there and I'm in the shower this morning because that's when all the ideas come, right? All the good ideas come in the shower. So I'm in the shower this morning and I'm thinking, okay, I happen now, again, I don't watch news. I don't even know where CNN is on my television. I do have cable, but I'm not sure why. And but I don't really, I keep up via, you know, the internet. And I see this Don guy said something to a woman yesterday about how she could have avoided being raped. And I thought to myself, now here's this woman writing me a letter, right, telling me that it's not appropriate to put a realistic depiction of rape in a young adult book. And what that girl will see today and yesterday and tomorrow and every day of the week are people saying things like that. Right? They're going to be saying, "Oh, well, there's a way. Well, if she wasn't, you know, if she just wasn't wearing the skirt," or the woman in Arizona, gosh, the judge, she was a female judge who actually told the woman who was sexually harassed and groped by a police officer in a bar, "Well, maybe you should just stay home." Okay, so that's the image we're giving teenagers, but we can't have it in books. And how many of these teenagers are already victims and survivors of sexual abuse or sexual assault? And for me, that's really important. I want to reach out and let people know, girls, boys, whatever, I want them to know that they can talk about this. Because the more I think about it, I can't understand the statistics. We got 1 in 4. Across the board, 1 in 4, both genders, pretty much we can even it out at that. But then we get 95% don't say anything. So where does that leave us? Is that 1 in 2? Is that 1 in 1.5? Where does it really leave us? And why aren't we talking about it? Because it's really affecting our culture. It's never going to stop unless we talk about it. And so that was my seg. I don't know where it left us, but go, somebody say something.
No, that was a good, I love those segs. That's always a good one. Particularly, I mean, obviously, like, my big thing is about silence. I work with an organization whose, like, sort of MO is coming forward and having survivors tell their own stories in their own words. And, you know, I know that there are a lot of reasons not to. I mean, actually, well, Amy, you read Bryson's post, like, you know, so there's going to be a post up on the TLT blog on Sunday that has to do with about everybody and the ants. And anyway, so the post is really wonderful because it's about this idea about why Lucky wouldn't disclose sexual violence. And it's such a great post because it talks about when we carry secrets and why we need to carry secrets. And I think that this is a good conversation to have with teenagers of both genders, because when you start having an idea that your secret isn't worth telling, then you start having this feeling that you yourself are not worth that. Like, and I think that that's where, when we sort of create a culture of we can't talk about these things, we don't want books about these things, this makes me really uncomfortable. You know, I had I did this like teen reads thing with my book, and at one point, like, it was a girl and a boy, and they were both like reviewing the book, and one of the questions was, would you recommend this to girls, would you recommend this to boys? And it was like a he said, she said thing. And the girl reader, the teen girl, said, well, I would recommend it to boys but not girls because girls are afraid enough. And I thought, Jesus, what kind of world are we living in that, like, that's her reaction, is like, I don't want this book out here because we're already, like, walking scared. And I was like, and you think, like, by not talking about it, you're not going to walk scared anymore? And, like, this is so interesting to me, like, this idea that if we don't talk about this, this goes away. It doesn't work that way. And if anything, like, it creates this culture where if you don't talk about this, then it gets worse. It becomes this sort of gunny sack of all of this stuff. And so anyway, it's just something that I have been thinking about, and maybe, like, you can respond to, particularly with regards to Lucky, because in Everybody Sees the Ants, because I feel like that is sort of relevant to this idea of conversation.
It's interesting with Lucky, and I had a quick back and forth with Bryson about the piece that'll go up. You said on Sunday, right? Yeah, either way, whenever it goes up. And what's interesting is that I left the truth in the shadows there, and what I did, it was you know, sort of the narrative acting as how do I say it, acting as the character. I left the truth in the narrative. Some readers like to read that book and not see any sexual violence in it. They see violence for sure. They know something happens. They know it's a threat, and they leave it at the threat. But the truth is in the shadow, right? So I was so thrilled. This is what I said to Bryson. I was thrilled that he shed light on the shadows, because for me, you know, I know what happened in that room, but I'm not going to tell anybody else. They can read it and figure it out themselves and figure out what it did to Lucky and why he does feel so small and insignificant, and it's so difficult for him to talk about it. And in fact, he talks to his he talks to his grandfather about it because he knows his parents are unavailable. And I think that's a huge issue, I think, because again, we're in this culture now. So how many parents, I don't think anybody has ever, I shouldn't say that, that's really, really exclusive, but I think it's very difficult to trust your parents when something awful happens to you, because you don't know what they're going to say or do, and you don't know how they're going to react. And up until then, it was, I spilled milk. Well, you shouldn't have been messing around at the table. So, which is true, right? Because that's what I say to my kids. If look, could you sit still? Could just eat your peas, And I'm trying to be nice, eat your peas, please. But then after a few of those, it's just like, eat your damn peas. And so they see us as Roald Dahl said it, adults don't look very good from a child's point of view. I can't remember if he actually said it far more beautifully than that. But, we are, how many people can actually come out? So, I mean, Lucky couldn't. And I think that with his secret, he told me. I didn't know his secret. I didn't know that secret until it hit me. Like, I wrote that book by the seat of my pants. So on page 168 or wherever the heck it shows up, that's when he told me. And I lost my cookies. I'm a Vulcan and I don't cry, but I sat there and I lost my shit. So I'm sorry, Carrie. I beat it. But I lost it because I thought to myself, this is horrible. I can't believe this character strung me along this long and told me all this stuff, and I thought it was some, so he finally tells me a secret, and we're not going to get into that. But yeah, I think that it's nice to open the narrative, and I feel that books like Forgive Me, Leonard Peacock can also do that, especially for young men.
It did, and I think in this really great way. About the thing about Forgive Me, Leonard Peacock was there was so much I guess sort of nuance in all of that stuff, and actually, and I think this is a great sort of segue into a new conversation topic with regards to I think now we're living in a world where people are understanding that rape and sexual violence is a lot more nuanced. There's a lot more layers to it. I mean, I think we, for a long time, we knew it's not just strangers in the alley, but even this idea of when survivors are coming forward, and it's happening more frequently, where they sort of own the fact that they didn't say no, but at the same time that they didn't consent. And now we're seeing this really sort of gray area where I read an article yesterday in a Canadian newspaper. It was the Canadian Daily Mail about the university up in Canada. And one of the things that they were saying was there was this girl and this guy, and they were kind of friends with benefits. And there got to a point where, she was really drunk, and he kind of coerced her into this. And it was the wording was really vague, and she agreed to it. But afterwards she was like, but I never really wanted to agree to it. I was kind of loaded, and I didn't really want to do it. But there was this expectation there. And I think this is an interesting thing, because I think that now we're getting into the nuance where, and I talk to teenagers, and there's a lot of times where I'll say, do you think this counts as rape? And then we have to get into a bigger discussion of, okay, well, legally it may not count, but ethically, are we okay with this? Do you really want to be wasted and having sex with someone who doesn't really want to have sex with you? And getting into a lot more nuance. And maybe you all could speak a little bit to that.
Well, here's the thing, and when we were prepping for this and talking on email, Amy kept saying how our culture is so sucky for many reasons, and one of the big reasons it's sucky is that we let rape and sexual assault share the stage or the media platform with sex in general, as if they're the same thing, as if I just don't think that those two things, like when we are talking about sex and then rape comes up, I think someone needs to just get the hook out and say, no, actually those things are not going to be talked about in the same way. The problem is that we don't have a conversation about sex that is at all useful for anybody who goes around and has sex with their body in reality. The conversations we have about sex do things like sell tires or advertising or are meant to be titillating. They don't actually give you any information about how you might have a good time when you're naked with someone else who's also naked. So instead we've got rape and that stupid Don Lemon comment about the Bill Cosby rape story about how she could just shut the whole thing down. I mean, talk about, we're okay with that being discussed on TV, but we could never, like, actually see nudity. We couldn't actually talk about how people have sex when it goes right. We can't see sex between normal people because you have to have a certain look and body, and it's crazy that conversation is all in one ball. It doesn't deserve to be sitting. Sex is so great and fun and amazing and beautiful and transformative. It doesn't get to sit next to rape on the stage, but that's where we've put it, and it drives me absolutely crazy because we don't know how to talk about sex with any sort of intelligence. And so so we get stuff like Don Lemon suggesting that the woman could have just repelled. Well, why didn't he think of not drugging her and raping her? Let's dial it back. But anyway, the whole idea is we get that kind of stupid conversation. We don't tell kids about anything to do with their bodies in schools. We abdicate that role to porn. Porn is the de facto sex educator in our nation because of abstinence ed. We don't know how to talk about it to our children. There's just a million reasons why these conversations, we're expecting to figure out what consent is and clear up the rape problem in colleges and high schools, except we're an insane culture who can't talk about sex to begin with in a rational way.
And we can't talk about how you can start, like, how to even figure out what you really want. Like, I think part of why these get all, like, mired in this mess is, and this actually goes a little bit to Glory, too, like this idea of what was your buy-in? What were you raised with? What do you know about sex, or what have you learned, right? And for girls, and this is one of the things Chri and I were talking a little bit yesterday about Perfectly Good White Boy and how, this is not a book about sexual violence, but I said it's really interesting to me, like, Niecy and Tristan this is an interesting relationship because she's like sort of having secret sex with him, and I was like, this is, and she can't really tell anyone, and he's got, does he have a girlfriend, Chri, is that right? Yeah, he's got this girlfriend, and I was like, but this actually speaks so much to what girls will suck up. And Chri said this great thing yesterday about how, like, we get so used to crumbs because we just want we want to be loved so much, we want something so badly that we're starving for it, so we just take these crumbs. And I think part of this has to do with our inability to have conversations about sex and emotional, like the emotional connection of that, and to say, like, okay, like, these are good things for you to learn, but you got to really learn, like, what you want. As a girl, you shouldn't be trying to get stuff over with, like, oh, I'm just trying to get it over with. And as a guy, you shouldn't, like, equally, the guy's buy-in of, yesterday in class I was talking about this predator-prey narrative, this, like, that there's always this chase, there's going to be this chase. And it's like, well, what if you're a guy who doesn't feel like chasing someone? You don't want to have to wear someone down to have sex. Brandy Colbert's point is such a great example of this idea of, like, chase, and, like, you have to wear someone down to have sex, because ultimately that's kind of coercion, and it's a different level of sexual violence that's really uncomfortable. But because we won't have these conversations about sex, we don't really know. And so, you know, guys think they've got to wear someone down, and girls think they have to be worn down. And like, what happens when girls are like, well, I don't want to be worn down. I want to have sex. I'm in. Like,
well, and that's what you see. Ellie, I love that part, the character of Ellie in Glory. She doesn't know exactly what she wants. And every time Glory would catch her, or, you know, find out about something she had done with one of those losery guys or whatever, and Glory would be all pissed off, I felt like, you know, that's totally real. Like, girlfriends get super invested in each other because they see each other as, you know, you are my mirror and you are my possibility, and when you let me down or you get hurt, I hurt. And Glory wouldn't say that explicitly, but like, I kept seeing Ellie as this girl going, I don't know what I want. I'm going to try this. Maybe this will work, you know, and maybe Marcus will work. And, you know, she's just trying so hard to get fed on a banquet of crumbs, you know, and Glory's like pissed at her, but she's still helping her, and she doesn't know why she's helping her. I love that she didn't really know why she was hugging her, but then she just did anyway. I thought that was so true about how girls, and then, you know, they judge each other, they judge themselves, and yeah.
We do. I have like 3 things I have to say, because Chri, you just said, and I put my hands up, I got really, really excited when you said this. But this idea that rape is brought into sex, this is the big one that gets me, because I was robbed at gunpoint when I was 24, I think, 24. And I was working retail, robbed at gunpoint. And when I explain what shock is to people and explain like how it went down, was there was an alarm button in that little cashier drawer, but I didn't press it the first time. Do you know why? Because I was scared. And then luckily the guy asked for more money, and I didn't give him a lot of money because I'm a cheap Pennsylvania girl, I guess. I didn't clear out the cash register. I don't know what I was thinking. I just didn't. But on the second go, then, you know, with the shotgun to my head, or the sawed-off shotgun, I did hit the alarm button, you know. But in shock, and I've experienced shock a bunch of times, you don't know what's going on. And I think Don Lemon should know this, because I believe he has a history. And is a survivor, I believe, himself. I'm just believing something said on Twitter, so please, I'm not sure if this is true, but apparently that has been a much retweeted tweet. So I don't understand how he can't understand that, you know what, when you're in the minute, you can't do anything about it. It's not sex. It's violence. There's no difference to me being shot, you know, almost shot in the head by this guy who wanted a few bucks for crack, and rape. It's the same damn thing. It's being beaten. That's what it is. It's not sex. And this is what gets me so fired up when people say things like, "Oh, well, Laurie Halsey Anderson's Speak is soft porn." No, it's not. Have you not seen soft porn? And don't you know what happens in that book? Drives me crazy. Just because you're talking to kids about a girl who gets raped doesn't mean it's porn. Porn and rape. What are you watching at home? What's your mental problem that you could equate porn with rape of a teenage girl? That's not my problem. That's that person's problem. But that whole problem comes from our culture, where our girls have people saying, well, they shouldn't be reading about this, or this is going to make us even more scared, but they can still turn on that news channel today, and they're going to see that story. And they see it every 5 days, every 3 days, every 2 days. They're seeing a story about something like this every single day, and it's driving me kind of a little bit bonkers. And I just went totally off topic. Oh, Ellie, yeah, okay, sorry, we'll get back to Ellie. Yeah, do you know, it was kind of fun. Like, I don't know if you guys get this when you write your books. I'm sure you do, because I think we all end up doing the same sort of weird things. But you're there and you're writing a thing, and you're like, oh yeah, you know, she called her, you know, oh, Ellie's such a slut, because she's going to get the crab treatment for Ellie at the drugstore. She says, I need some treatment for crabs or whatever for my slutty friend. And everybody at this drugstore laughs. And she gets it. And then she kind of, you know, why do I think Ellie's a slut? Ellie's not a slut. Ellie's my friend. That's a horrible word. And that was one of the words I used at that school visit I mentioned the other day to you guys before we went live, is I'm tired of that word. I'm tired of people commenting on other people's appearances. I'm tired of it. Who cares? I'm tired of all that stuff, because really, like, we're all human beings, and we're delicate human beings, and you know, I think you're right, Chri, and I mean, I've always thought that, I mean, sex education when I was in school actually was pretty decent, but no one ever talked about consent, really. No one ever talked about the actual act, but they did teach us a lot of other, like, great stuff, whereas now it's very rare to find decent sex education. And I think it's
STDs. It's like a lot of discussion around STDs. It's like the whole health thing. Can we go back to the slut thing just really quickly? I actually am really interested in this because I think that like authors are frequently or can be criticized for word choices that we make in our books. And and of course, I'm sure this has happened to you too, Chri. It's totally happened to me. And there's a point where I want to be like, and of course I won't say anything, but when people come after me, I want to be like, but you know, it's one thing for me to understand that I wouldn't use that word, or that's not a word that I would use, but it's a different to like understand the context of where Glory is, where Ellie is, and who these people are, and that maybe, you know, and that Glory would use that term. And, you know, just like as an example, I had this friend tell me about this story where this girl and this guy were like making out outside the you know, in the locker area, whatever, out in the hallway, and then she followed him into the boys' bathroom, and then she came out, and like, you know, they both came out, and she said he raped me because she had told him, you know, I don't want to have sex with you. But, you know, and so my friend is telling his class, like sort of talking about this whole scenario with his class, and they say, well, most of the girls in the class were like, yeah, but she followed him into that bathroom. And there was like this, and they were like, you know, so she has a boyfriend, she's the slut, you know, and it's this implication that like there are reasons to separate ourselves, why we're not her, you know, we won't be rapeable because we didn't, you know, we don't have boyfriends and go and follow other boys into the bathroom, all these different things. But right. I think, so there, I guess there's twofold to this question. The first is this idea of when we as authors use words that make other people uncomfortable, as if we're somehow endorsing that, which I think probably Chri has a lot to say about. And then the second part being this idea of the culture where teenagers do use the term slut, that's not something that is so foreign, that we're using a word that's not, you know, that's not being used, and when you use that word with intent like you did, Amy. So
I have a quick answer because I can't wait to hear Chri's answer. The word thing is great because look, I use the N-word in my books. Do you know why? Because I grew up in a very, very heavily like Klan populated area. I heard and hear the N-words being spoken. Now, here, when I was working with Andrew Carr on Dust 100 Dogs, he queried it, one of the words I used, which was fortnight. Fortnight's very popular, you know, it's still in use in I guess, England, Ireland, all over the place, but we don't use it much here. So he said, do you want to say 2 weeks? I'm like, no, I want to say fortnight. And if somebody doesn't know what it is, they can look it up. Like, right? So that's fine. So that's a word that's an example of a word that's out of use. And the N-word is not out of use. Slut is not out of use. Any of those words, I mean, there's so many of them. Racial, gender, slur, all the slurs, none of them are out of use. I will stop using the N-word in my books when it's actually as out of date as fortnight. That's how I feel. And you know why? Because that's what I heard all the time in high school. That's why I have a lump on my head and why I got beat up by a skinhead, because I was an N-word lover, because I liked Bob Marley. I mean, this is what made this guy beat me up. So it's sort of like, you know, this is the world we live in. And I forget the second bullet point already because I didn't write it down. I have to write everything down.
It was about slut and Glory in particular, her use of that word.
Oh, well, I just think it's a natural word. It's the first word everybody comes to. It's the first word that comes to mind. Let's be fair. I mean, there's Ellie. Ellie's got her shirt unbuttoned a little bit more, and Glory's just sort of not interested in guys. She's not interested in sex. She's not really interested in any of that because she's so freaking weighed down with her mother's stuff and with her life stuff and with graduating and just not knowing what's going on. So it's really more of a real life crisis where she's in this place, and there are no guys in her world. Like, she hasn't gone to that place yet. So she tosses it out there because she thinks that Ellie's actions are slutty, and then she realizes, no, she's not a slut. She's just doing stuff I'm not doing. It's just very simple. Like, look, I eat green juice. You may hate green juice. Carrie may be drinking coffee. This is water. I don't drink caffeine. We're all different. It's just I don't think Carrie's a slut for drinking coffee.
Yeah. Well, and you know what? Just to that point, and actually, this is just, I think that friendship is really nicely nuanced in that book. And to that point, and I think, like, we forget, that I would say, like, I spent a lot of my high school career surrounded by girls who spent a lot of time tearing me down. And I think it wasn't really until I was in college where I was like, oh, wait, like, I am now around women who build me up. And I don't know what was going on that I decided, like, that there was and the thing was that I have great friends from high school still. There were, like, just pockets in there where I would be, like, really wanting to be included, and so I would hang out with people who would really spend a lot of time tearing me down. And I think that there's, like, again, this goes a little to the idea of there's this buy-in, that there's a competition or something that's happening there. And so I wonder also, too, like, to Carrie's earlier point about how great Ellie is, because she doesn't really know what she wants, and she's kind of figuring that out. And, like, Gloria initially is like, oh, this, and then she's like, well, actually, no, I don't know why I'm friends with her. Well, yeah, I kind of do. And I don't know why I'm hugging her. Well, like, all of that, I think it's so greatly nuanced because it speaks so much to this idea of friendship and girl friendship that happens, and sort of the evolution of what we originally as friends, like what we're originally looking for as friends, and sort of maturing so that we start surrounding ourselves by people who, like, build us up or that we're interested in, or that kind of thing.
Well, and she calls, in the book, Gloria calls their latitude, longitude friends, like they're an accident of geography, which is sort of everybody's situation. You are stuck with the people you go to school with or do your activities with. Those are your friends whether you like it or not, because it's not like you can pick up and move when you're a kid. You're stuck. And I think, she doesn't really know why they're friends except for geography, and she's trying to make the best of it. But I also think the reason why slut is the first word is there is no word for females who are, or girls who are sexually curious. There's no word for that. You're either a virgin, and then if you fall off the other side of the fence, then you're a slut, even if you've done it once. There's no word for a girl who's got sexual curiosity. We have lots of words for guys. They are horn dogs, they are players, they are, man whores or whatever, but a girl there's no sexual curiosity on the part of young women that's invisible. I think that exists. It exists amongst the conversations that girls have with their friends, and that's exactly how I felt as a young woman. Like, I didn't feel like I was falling into some, opium den of iniquity by wanting to have sex, and but I think, like Ellie, I didn't know what I wanted. I wanted to be curious because I didn't know what it was that I wanted to want. And in a lot of ways, there's no way to know what you want sexually except for, like, trying it. And that's the part where everybody kind of grabs the handrail, especially when they're thinking about their own daughters. They're like, oh, my God, my kid is going to go wander around sexually, and holy, this could really end poorly, and I don't really have an answer for that. I have a daughter too, but there's nothing okay about a young woman being sexually curious, because we just sit there and automatically go, oh, you're going to get pregnant, you're going to get pubic lice, you're going to get a bad reputation, and so it all just goes underground, so we don't get to find out that information. It turns into a back fence conversation amongst girls and their friends, and I just really want that conversation to come up to the surface. I think men suppress that conversation because it scares them, women talking about what they do naked and what their bodies look like and their behavior, and that is another thing that is a whole different topic. But like, I think there's nothing more inevitable than teenagers having sex at some point. Everyone has a different timeline on their body and everything, but there's nothing more inevitable than that. And so this idea that they're just going to wait until they, finish graduate school and have a good job and then find a good partner and have sex for the first time is like completely bananas. But that there's this sort of no man's land that we've abdicated as a culture to actually, giving them words that are more useful than slut or virgin or whatever.
Yeah,
and I don't know where that went. That just went.
And I also think, like, along those lines, that these are conversations that girls, that the idea that sexual curiosity can be explored between girls and often is. So, like, Ask the Passengers is such a great example too of like all these nuances within friendships that sort of thing can. So, like, it's not really coming out in parents. And Amy, you made a really great point. Like, and frankly, I never had those conversations with my parents. Like, I for sure still don't, but awkward. But the idea that, like, I mean, whatever, Carrie and I have those conversations.
Let's do it today. Girl, let's just do it today. Let's call our parents and just tell them.
Exactly. Let's just, like, lay it all out. But, like, those conversations, like, those are conversations that you do have with your friends. Like, even if there's, like, judgment there, or even if whatever, it's like your friends who you're asking to go to the store to get your pubic lice mask, like, whatever. That's what's happening. You're not asking your mom to go get that.
I was waiting for Glory to, like, comb the knits out. Like, I thought, is she gonna help her?
And the thing is, like, those are all conversations, and to go back to this idea with the sexual violence too, those are the conversations. And when I go and talk to teenagers about this, the first thing I say is, like, your friends will disclose to you. Most of you will be first responders. Your friends will tell you first. So what you say matters. How you judge, what you think, all these things matter. This has import in your life and how you talk about it and whatever. And I think that's a really important nuance to understand, is that even when you're not, even when you're geographical friends, like that, the idea is, like, this is your go-to person for whatever reason.
Yeah, I found it, like, it was funny, you mentioned Ask the Passengers earlier, and I found it fun to write about a pushy woman who loves women. There's nothing wrong with that, and I've run into a few, and so it was fun to watch somebody. Usually pushiness when it comes to sex is always assigned to men, but then it's in this form of a woman, but she's a lesbian, so it's still okay. I'm putting air quotes there. You guys can't see me, but I'm putting them there. And it's sort of interesting to me because what we really want to talk about, I think, with our kids, no matter what genders, is boundaries. Consent, boundaries especially. Where are you comfortable? And I think that's what Ellie was trying to figure out. Where am I comfortable? Do I feel slutty? Like, because she does eventually say, I kind of feel like a slut. Well, then that's fine. Then maybe approach it a different way. Maybe we can talk about it or whatever. Or no, dude, you're not a slut. You're just doing your thing, But I love that we can, like, maybe discuss boundaries, because all of us have had somebody at some point overstep a boundary, even if it's just within friendship, even if it's just in basic conversation and they're close talkers, the people that are close right up to your face, whatever boundary it is, right? People have broken it. So we've all had someone break a boundary on us, and we all have to learn to set our own. What I say is, I teach people how to treat you. That's what I say to my kids. You got to teach people how to treat you, because people come from other places, so they're used to face talking. That's obviously a joke, because that's a very minor thing compared to many other things that we're talking about. But people are used to these other things, and they don't realize, And if they come from a house where, rape is about, well, she shouldn't have been, well, she shouldn't have been, or well, he shouldn't have been, well, then that's what they're going to think. And somewhere along the way, I wish, a few weeks ago, I was doing an interview with somebody, and she's a teacher at a school, and so she handed out index cards and asked her students to write down, she asked them what feminism was. Now, I can't share the answers with you because they're private, but thank God, like maybe 50% of them were basically on target when it came to that. But there were some that were shocking, like, because one of them actually said something like, because if a girl gets gang raped, it's her. She should never been there in the first place. That has nothing to do with the question that was asked. But how can there be people thinking this? I don't understand. And where are they hearing it? Because again, we're going back to nature, nurture, environments. Where are they hearing this? You know, I'm frightened of what my kid must say at school after hearing things at home, you know, but they're just going to be weird things. Whereas if this is where the atmosphere that we're raising our children in, where we're judging, when 14 people, let's say, and I'm going to throw out Bill Cosby because I am, but when 14 human beings come out and tell very individualized and yet similar stories about someone raping them, how is anybody still going to insult them by asking them, well, there was a way you could stop it? And more importantly, I hate to do this to it because, again, I know so many male survivors, but we'll flip it. If 14 men came out against a popular and famous woman, would it take 14? Would it? And it's weird. It's a weird thing to say, but I mean it, even though I don't want to have to say it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing with these famous people, again, we have this idea that if you do something artistic, then you're like somehow above it all morally, which doesn't make any sense. If you read the biographies of many famous artists, they're kind of horrible, selfish people, stem to stern. Just because Bill Cosby is good at his job, just because a football player is really good at being an athlete, doesn't mean that he can also be, you know, monstrous in this other way. It's like if we esteem the job enough, we will forgive the sexual assault. Like, you know, if a janitor did this, a custodian, we wouldn't be like, but he was such a good janitor. You guys, you know, we are going to say, oh, well, he's a janitor. What do you expect? He takes out trash. So this idea that you can't be good at your job, you can't produce something beautiful and still be monstrous is something we can't apparently grab a hold of in our culture, and drives me crazy because it's like we all have those capacities inside us to be, you know, horrible and to be noble, and it's like people just want to think that the only people who are ever horrible are just fully 100% horrible, and that's why this whole idea of 1 in 4 women being raped. My husband, in fact, could not even stand that statistic. He wanted to see the data. I can't believe that. Do you know what that means? And I was like, you haven't lived through conversations with your friends for years like I have about this. This is completely weird to you. In a way, it's not weird to me. It's so much easier to just decide that's not true because it's so huge, and again, he's helpless to do anything about it. You know, having a girl child that is wandering around in this world in such an unsafe way. It was a really big moment for him. And so, yeah.
Yeah, and I think actually it's interesting. So do you remember like a couple months ago where they did that street harassment video, and it was like, and there was a lot of racial problems with it, and it was not, you know, there were like flaws within the video itself, and yet at the same time, like initially my reaction was, yeah, like yeah, like this has happened to me. Like I walk in Chicago, this happens, you know. And it was very interesting. Like I think I put it up on Facebook, and there were like guys who were like, well, wait, what? Like, you know, like it was so startling to them that would be, and I was like, this seems very, I mean, it's a really interesting thing. Like I heard Roxane Gay the other day go on this whole thing about like what we accept as not that bad. And to me, like I watched that video and thought, yeah, that's not that bad. You know, and what I loved about Glory actually was this idea that we all at this moment are sort of, this is not that bad. Like we're a little outraged about stuff, but like the political climate right now, like we're like kind of bummed about it, and then we're also like, oh, but look at this picture of Kim Kardashian. I mean, like, we're so distracted, and we're sort of in this not that bad place, right? And so I do think there's something to be said about this idea of what we learn to sort of suck up, and I love sort of the extremeness of what happened with Glory and being like, well, actually, like, there's only a certain amount where we get to not that bad, where suddenly we're like, wait a second, no woman's allowed to work anymore, and suddenly, like, all these things, and it's like taking not that bad and saying, like, if we actually analyzed what that looks like, this is what that future could be. And I think a lot of people, Amy, have like pointed to that, saying, and I loved it, because I feel like a lot of people have said, like, this is like, for as much as this isn't real, this feels very much like it potentially is the political climate that we're living in right now. And you know, so maybe you could just speak a little bit to that, because I know we only have a few minutes left. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's funny because in a way it was a parody. And don't forget, Ellie wasn't seeing the same Civil War. This is where Glory's head is. She's aware, as she says early in the book. I'm just aware. So you know, the way she sees the world, and then therefore the way the future comes to her, I think that's a really great way to put it. You know, oh, it's not that bad. Oh, it's not that bad. Then where is that bad? Where does that line, you know, kind of come into it? And you know, I was doing an interview earlier in the last few months where someone said something about laws, and how I respect all the laws, all the amendments. I'll even like, I live in an area where I see. Have you guys seen the families in the back of the minivans? They have the little kids and the big kids, the little family with the dog and all that. I have ones with assault rifles all the way down to rifles and then pistols, and it says, you have your family, I have mine. Now, I don't have this family, and I'm a little sad about that, because cuddling is going to be difficult. But more importantly, no one has actually tried to take those away from you. Now let's go to Texas and look at women's rights and look at our rights when it comes to Roe v. Wade. They're going away. People are actually taking away these things from us. These are things we've fought a long time for, and they're not able to understand on a human level why these things are important, especially when it comes to sexual violence, especially when it comes to just being a woman. And I don't understand how one group of people can say, respect our amendment, respect our rights, and then at the exact same time say that our rights don't mean anything. Because why, though? You know, because why? Is it because we're women? Is it because it's our uteruses? Can I say uteruses, or is it right? I'm not really sure. I bet you it's both.
Fine. Uterus is fine.
Okay, thank you. But yeah, I completely just lost my track. So when it all comes down to it, yeah, I think a lot of people have said, "Oh my gosh, did you write this in response to what's happening to women's rights in America right now?" And I thought, of course not. I had to write it 3 years ago for it to come out this year. So no, I didn't. But no offense. Like, I mean, I'm only 44. I'm still a spring chicken. Like, this stuff's been going on forever. I remember my mom's ERA pin. I remember how it's not moving forward as quickly. I remember my boss saying, "Oh, well, he needs to support a family," when I was making $7 an hour, and I needed to support one too. But it's just that guy's family was more important, because he's a guy, so he has to make more to feel proud with his wife, who's not making $7 probably, just like me. So, you know, I don't know. I just don't understand why there has to be that. And that was such a great way to put it, Krista. Why there has to be a, oh, well, that's not so bad. That's not so bad. And then it's just like, oh, well, now that's really terrible. One of the things about fair pay I don't understand is that a lot of the people who are against it are actually men from single mothers. And I thought to myself, don't you think that maybe things could have been a little nicer for your mom and less stressful for your mom had she had a decent paycheck, or at least a wee bit better anyway? And so yeah, I don't know. It was a parody in a way, and then it came true, or is coming true, but not the whole thing. Let's hope. But you never know.
It's interesting. I feel like with this project, what we've all experienced, and I think Karen has noticed it a lot too, is that we read these books that are about, that have to do with sexual violence or feminism or, losing sexual agency or all these different things. And people are like, yeah, it's just like X that just happened. And we all know, like the publishing cycle, that yes, like I read that for, that these authors maybe wrote that 3 or 4 years ago. And that the reality of what people think are these timely things have more to do with this like pervasive timelessness of really, and this idea that like, I mean, you talk about your mom, and this is my like quick story, but you talk about your mom and like trying to get the ERA. When I was a freshman in college in Iowa, the ERA was actually on the ballot for the state of Iowa. And so we were all like the PAFA people, which is the Politically Active Feminist Alliance. We were all out there holding our ERA signs, and several like trucks, at the ballots, several trucks like kept trying to run us down. And I was like, God, do you hate me that much? Like, is this so much of a problem? And this kind of circles back to our very original idea of it's not at the expense of you. I'm not going to take the $9 that you're making and say, well, you're going to make 7 now and I'm going to make 9. Right. I'm saying, like, why are we not both making 9?
Right, exactly. That's exactly it, and that's sort of, I think that's the one. And there's so many different parts of feminism that are overlooked, but I think that's the big one because yes, I've been not nearly run over, but yeah, the minute you put a protest sign in your hand and you just happen to have breasts, you're suddenly the bad guy because you must be protesting for the women's. Oh, the women's. And you know what really gets me? It's like, think of your mom, think of your sister, think of your daughter. Now, how about just think of another human being? I'm tired of this. I'm tired of it. It's a human being.
Chri, do you want to say one last thing? Because our hour is up.
I do want to just make one point about what you guys were all saying about how, like, the books seem so timely, but they were written like 2, 3, sometimes 4 years ago. And I think that just highlights the fact that, this is nothing new. This has always been happening. But it goes back, to what Chri said about now all of a sudden it's happening much more publicly. They can't hide it, and so it seems timely. But, those of us, who have been, living with our eyes open in this world know, like, it's not new. It's not all of a sudden. It's always been there. It's just been hidden. But because of things like the internet and social media and your cell phones and those type of things, that you do have more of a record of it. And the other thing I wanted to say is when you guys said something about, Chri was saying something about talking to her her husband and the 1 in 4 statistic, and you guys talked about talking to a friend. And I think what's interesting is not how many friends that you talk to and they can tell you some kind of story, but how many friends you can talk to and they'll tell you a story, and it usually starts with, well, the first time it happened.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, and that's the other thing. Like, it's not just something once. I think particularly like the catcalling that you guys mentioned. I mean, I one time tried to write out a whole entire list of all the times that I experienced some type of street harassment and catcalling, and it started when I was in the 6th grade, and it became a really long list, and I'm like, well, this is depressing. I'm going to stop now.
Yeah.
So,
and again, that goes back to the idea of not that bad.
Right.
Ms. Ryan, go.
Well, and I know the broken windows theory of criminality has been dismissed or criticized, but I often think that catcalling is sort of the broken windows of rape culture. Like, if it's okay on the street to holler vulgar things at a woman, it sort of contributes to an environment where, the end point is that we are going to not give a shit if she says yes or no when it comes to sex. If that is the kind of waters we're swimming in, and we accept that because we're all like donkeys with heavy loaded baggage going, what baggage, what load, because we're just used to that. That's just our reality. I kind of feel like the idea of women being behind the camera, being content creators, having voice, is to show this sort of, to show men what they are missing. I think a lot of men are allies, they just don't understand our point of view. They feel attacked. They don't understand what their role is, and to kind of show them that, you know, these are the waters we swim in, and we don't even think about it. And you have a feeling, like you were saying, well, if a man was, or if a man accused, you know, a woman of doing this, and how everyone would lose their minds. I think that's very true. You know, if a man gets a hangnail, the whole world rushes to his side with the first aid kit. But, you know, women and children have to be like beaten bloody several times before anyone will take action. And so, you know, again, I feel that this whole the thing about Glory and the story is her saying that this is the future. I want to know that I'm a part of it. And she's making herself a part of it slowly. I think that's very important. And yeah, I think that's all I have to add.
Yeah. Thank you, Amy, for being a content creator.
Thank you so much. Just wait till next year, ladies. The content for next year, the product of next year is all very relevant to this topic, so I hope to come back and talk about it.
Oh, good. Good. All right, Karen, you want to close us out?
Yes, I just want to thank all three of you for your time. That was a brilliant conversation. I just, you know, feel so honored to be able to be a part of it. You guys add so much positive things to this, you know, world. So thank you. You're all awesome content creators and doing important things. Thank you so much for that. And thank you for just the generosity of giving us your time to come here and do this chat. I know that you guys have to go write and do those things. And thank you for everybody who is listening now and will listen later. And please keep the conversation going. It's really important. So thank you all very much.
Thanks.